Lo, my progressive leftist holdouts, gaze upon the data and despair. America became slightly more conservative over the past year, reversing, to an extent, a trend where the Democratic Party and America in general was becoming more and more liberal. The new data from Gallup shows that's actually begun reversing. And I can speculate as to why. I don't necessarily believe the country is becoming more conservative as the data might suggest. I think what's happening is people no longer identify as liberal because the left has gone completely off the rails. What do you think would happen if you took a sane, average Democratic voter, placed them in front of a TV and played the Democratic debate where they all raise their hand to give government health care to non-citizens? They're going to say, well, I don't identify with them. So they'll ask you, are you a liberal? And they'll say, well, the liberals want to give, health care to non-citizens. That's not me. I'm more moderate. And thus we can actually see moderates and conservatives kind of tick up. Conservatives definitely tick up, and liberal ticks down. This, along with other data from a year ago, conservatives greatly outnumber liberals in 19 U.S. states. This is also very important data when you now look to a year in the future and the country has become more conservative. The reason why I think this is so important when they track the 2018 data on states is that last year, a month before this came out about conservative states, we saw that the country had remained steady, right? Democrats stayed where they were, moderates stayed where they were, conservatives stayed where they were, or I should say liberals, conservatives, and moderates. And today, the new report from Gallup shows it's actually ticking downward for liberals. So let's read this, and I want to talk to you about why and what I think is going to happen. And I really want to lay into the media because the double standard has become so insanely palpable. I think one of the reasons that's driving people away from the left is that it's become so painfully obvious the media is biased. I'll just show you right now. I won't bear it. I mean this seriously. This is a story from the Washington Post. Rep. Stefanik tweets altered photo of Pelosi in GOP fundraising appeal, and the headline might make you think she's pushing fake news. It's literally just a campaign ad, the same as basically anyone's ever done. And if you're a regular, sane, liberal voter and you see this, you're probably going, this is insane. How do they think we're stupid? Well, the answer is, in my opinion, I believe that the average journalist today is less intelligent than the average person. Don't ask me how or why. It may have to do with being, most of these people go to college, they get institutionalized, they don't experience the real world. They live in a bubble away from sane, regular human beings, the top of an ivory tower, and can't tell what's happening. And then they start pumping out media like this. And when regular Americans who have been Democrats or liberals their whole lives see it, they say, that's not me. So basically, here's what I think happens. What does it mean to be liberal? Well, I guess liberal and conservative kind of more represent a tribe nowadays. And so for people who are, longstanding liberals, they're probably looking at the leaders of the Democratic Party as the liberals. They're not, but that's what they call them. And thinking, I don't align with them. I align more so in the other direction. What's really happening, as I've shown you in all the different graphs, the left has gone so far left that if you're a liberal, you are closer to Republican than you are to Democrat at this point. That's why people are now saying they're not liberals. I hate it. We're liberals. Accept it. They're leftists. There's a big difference. But let's read this story. Now Gallup says the U.S. remained center-right ideologically in 2019, but the graph actually shows liberals going down, conservatives going up, and I think that's very significant. I got more data for you, but before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you would like to support my work. Sign up. It's a subscriber thing. You can crypto, physical address, etc. Also, though, I have a new show coming very, very soon. Equipment and everything will be here in less than a week, and it's going to be more stories. A lot of this, it's going to be very similar. I'm redesigning the whole set. It's going to be epic. YouTube.com/TimCastIRL. It's going to be a longer form podcast, a lot of guests. So it'll be a supplemental to everything I already do. Check it out. Let's get back to the news. Gallup reports, as Americans continued to lean more Democratic than Republican in their party preferences in 2019, the ideological balance of the country remained center-right, with 37% of Americans on average identifying as conservative during the year, 35 as moderate, and 24 as liberal. And here's what we can see. So moderates remained steady over the last year at 35%. Conservatives went up 2% and liberals went down 2%. What this means is I can speculate a million different things, but it would seem the simple answer is many people who consider themselves moderate probably became conservatives. Many people who consider themselves liberal now consider themselves moderates, but it's also entirely possible there was an entire party flip. We saw Bernie or bust voters, right? 12 to 18% of Bernie Sanders supporters voted for Donald Trump. That's someone who might say they're liberal now saying they're conservative, skipping over moderate entirely. I would like to lean more towards, I think we're seeing people who claim to be liberal now claim to be conservative because moderates choose themselves as moderates for a reason. There's a reason why I don't consider myself, a far leftist. No, I consider myself a liberal. I think that's fair. But I think what we're seeing here is more of a tribal reaction of what it means to be liberal. Liberal is supposed to be, kind of based in liberty, right? It's somewhat progressive. It's freedom. Conservative is supposed to be about tradition. But now we're seeing the Conservative Party become much more liberal, classically liberal, and we're seeing the Democratic Party become much more authoritarian, far left. But because people still say liberal and conservative for the two parties, I'd be willing to bet you have regular old Democrats saying, I'm not liberal anymore when they really, really are. Or it's also fair to say, you know what? Maybe liberal is conservative now. Maybe what used to be Democrat is literally now conservative because everything's moved over, I guess. Let's continue. They say the 2019 findings are based on combined data from 21 Gallup telephone surveys conducted throughout the year, encompassing over 29,000 interviews with U.S. adults. The percentage identifying as conservative in 2019 was up 2 points from the 35% measured in 2018, while the percentage liberal was down 2 points from 26. While these changes are statistically significant, some 2-point changes in the past were short-lived, so it will be important to see whether these trends continue in 2020. It will. But I'll make a prediction, man. Listen, I was wrong about 2018. I thought Trump's base would come out. I thought the Republicans were going to sweep everything, potential supermajority, and it's because of the insanity. But I was wrong. Trump's base didn't come out, at least according to the New York Times. Most Trump voters stayed home. Or I shouldn't say most. I say a large portion of Trump voters stayed home. And that's one of the reasons Trump was really adamant about campaigning, saying, consider it my name on the ballot, but it didn't work. Trump's voters like Trump. Many of these people are not Republicans. Some are independent, some are Obama voters, so they don't care to show up for the midterms. And this was taken advantage of by Democrats who showed up in droves and reclaimed the House and used that to impeach Donald Trump with no statutory crime. They still haven't handed over the articles. It is sheer absurdity. But now because of impeachment, because of Trump's name on the ballot, I believe 2020, the end of the year, November, we are going to see a massive sweep. But hey, don't get me wrong. I was wrong about 2018. I have my reasoning. But I will add one more thing before we go on. Look, I've been saying over and over again, the Democrats are hurting themselves. They're going to keep losing. And there's more data right now showing that my general assessment is correct. I don't think I'm right all the time, but I've been warning the Democrats and the left. It's literally what I do all day, ranting and raving about how insane they've gotten. Well, what happens if you don't listen? Conservative goes up, liberal goes down. That's right. But let's see what we got here. They say Republicans remain mostly conservative party. While the country as a whole may be center right, that is not the case for Republicans who overwhelmingly identify as conservative. Conservatism averaged 73% among Republicans in 2019, maintaining the peak level recorded last year and previously in 2012. Most other Republicans, 21% of the party, identified as moderate, while 4% were self-identified liberals. So wait. There are people who are registered as Republicans who actually consider themselves liberal. That is also serious bad news for Democrats, though the number isn't really significant, and the amount of moderates have gone down. We can see since 2015, Republicans have skewed a little bit more conservative. But I'm not super concerned about what's going on with the Republican Party. They're going to vote for Republicans, right? Let's read. The large majority of Republicans have consistently labeled themselves conservative in Gallup polling over the life of this trend, although the proportion has inched up from about 6 in 10 during the early 1990s to over 7 in 10 more recently. The shift may relate to the decrease in the percentage identifying as Republican over the same period, and the corresponding increase in political independent identification. People who once might have been liberal or moderate Republicans may increasingly identify as politically independent instead. Now, this is interesting. Liberal identification levels off among Democrats. Now, I'm really interested, why Gallup is framing it this way. They titled the article, "The U.S. Remained Center-Right," when clearly we're seeing a shift towards conservatism, and even the Democratic Party has become more conservative over the past 2 years. Take a look at this. Democratic, they say it leveled off. Okay, I think that's fine, but you can say ticks towards conservative. Democratic partisans are more ideologically diverse than Republicans, with 49% identifying as liberal, 36% as moderate, and 14% as conservative. There's probably a big boost of never-Trumpers in there. The liberal wing of the Democratic Party has about doubled in size over the past quarter century, rising from 25% to 51% in 2018. The slip to 49% in 2019 suggests the trend may be slowing or leveling off, at least temporarily. It could also be suggesting it's reversing. But, we'll see, because I do think it's fair to point out there have been downturns, from 2010 to 11. It did tick downward before going back up. So it's entirely possible that things change. We saw an increase in conservatism at the same time. Now, here's the important part. Moderates outnumber conservatives among independents. This is really important for Democrats because independent voters lean conservative. Independents typically mirror the country as a whole, but in this case, they are more centrist than center-right. A large plurality identify as politically moderate, whereas 30% call themselves conservatives and only slightly fewer are liberal. Independents' political views in 2019 are nearly identical to those from 2018 and are generally in line with a long-term pattern, although conservatism was a bit higher among this group during the Obama years. In 2019, among independent voters, the amount identifying as liberal has gone down. Conservative has gone up over the past year, and moderate has stayed relatively stable. Politically independent voters, people like me. I lean slightly to the left. I'm probably more of an independent liberal, and I keep shrieking, and this is why. I scream at the top of my lungs, and I complain all day on the internet about how blue party bad. I know it's a bit annoying even to me, but at a certain point, I think it's fair to say the data shows that I'm right. Independents are skewing slightly more conservative. What did you do last year, and why did you do it? Well, I think it's fair to point out that the economy is doing better and better. And I think people are starting to realize the media is full of it. And that means, the average person who watches the news and says they're lying. I think it's fair to point out that 2019 was the year we learned about all these hoaxes, like Russiagate. And people probably had like a smack in the face moment where they're sitting there saying look, the media said over and over again, Trump and Russia. And then boom, the hammer drops, fake news for 3 years. What do you think that's going to do to the average person? For 3 years, bashing everyone over the head with this insane narrative, and the economy is skyrocketing. I pointed out in a segment I did last night at 4 p.m. that I was speaking to a saleswoman who told me she made more money. She said, I made more money last year than I ever have. And I said, yeah, the economy's great, isn't it? And that's why people are going to vote for Donald Trump. But when you combine these things, what do you get? You get an insane media pushing out insane nonsense. You get record economies, and people are confused as to why the TV keeps saying the same thing when everything is going great. You look at what's going on now with, Middle Eastern tensions. I'm not going to get super specific, but the reaction from the Democrats is mind-numbing. I mean, look, I am an anti-war person, very much so. I've always been a left-leaning, very staunchly anti-war. And I'm looking at the narrative coming out from these leftists, and I'm just shocked. It's insane. So I'm not surprised. And I would be willing to bet the trend will continue. People who identify as liberal are going to keep ticking downward so long as the Democrats stay on this course of action. And of course they are, because they're addicted, and it's the fault of the media. Let me show you a few more things. I think it's really important to point out data tracking from 2018, Gallup, published February 22nd, 2019. Conservatives greatly outnumber liberals in 19 U.S. states. This is significant because some of these states are considered in play or swing states. We can see this. Ohio, for instance, more conservative than average. Ohio is going to be a very, very important state. We can see, for the most part, this tracks normally with what we would expect. I mean, a lot of the blue states are blue, a lot of the red states are red, but there are a few very important swing states that are slightly leaning conservative, and that's going to be good news for Trump. The reason I point this out is because this data kind of tracks in line with what we expect from a presidential election. But with more people now, a 2% swing. Think about this. A 2% swing within the Democratic Party and within the independent voters and among Republicans in general, as a whole in this country, a 2% swing from liberal to conservative. That says to me, if Trump won in 2016, he's got a 2% bump. in general voter mentality, in general voter identity. That's going to be huge for him, let alone the fact that the economy is doing ridiculously well. Now, there is something else I really want to briefly mention. A couple things as we move on. I want to get to the economy and I'll talk about what we can expect. This is a chart called Political Polarization in the American Public going up to 2014 from Pew. And it shows that for the most part, the Republicans have barely moved, right? A lot of people have highlighted this. I'm highlighting it now just as we move through to make this point. This is just more data to show the Democrats have moved far left. Republicans have ticked only slightly to the right, showing that when the left says the right is far right, conservatives are going crazy. No. It's them on a train off into the wilderness. And the conservatives and the moderates are sitting right there confused. And as your train goes faster and faster, further and further left, you leave people behind who now say, I'm not on the liberal side anymore. They're going to say they're conservative. They're going to vote that way. Another important piece of data from last year is that Generation Z is the first generation in nearly 100 years to slightly tick more conservative. And I think this may have to do with birth rates. But let's get to the other more important reason. I think a big factor, we got this story from the AP today. U.S. employers expected to have added 160,000 jobs in December. There's no denying it. The economy is great. In fact, the economy is so good, Taco Bell recently announced they're going to pay 6 figures to their managers, and they're going to provide all employees with paid benefits. We saw from the story, I think it was Business Insider, that even Shake Shack is now offering a 4-day work week. All of these things the left claimed they wanted: higher wages, benefits, 4-day work week, less hours, more pay. It's being accomplished under Trump. So what do you think the average person's going to say? Now, I'll be fair. Listen, this all makes sense. Most liberals are not going to simply be like, I'm conservative now, and just, jump off the bandwagon. But some will. 2%. These people are looking around the news and they're looking at this psychotic story. Look at this. Rep. Stefanik tweets altered photo of Pelosi. It's literally just a filter on Pelosi. It's what they've always done. Is the Washington Post going to run a story now saying that, Republicans running doctored footage because they used a red filter and they put splatters on it and they say they used manipulation tactics to make it seem evil? What do you think political ads have always been? But let me exemplify this for you. Check this out. The Washington Free Beacon shows how Nancy Pelosi and many other people literally do the same thing. At a certain point, the average person is going to say, this is insane. The Washington Post ran a story, the paper, the Democracy Dies in Darkness paper runs a story claiming she published an altered photo, and literally everyone does this all the time. There's going to be a certain amount of people who think, stop calling me stupid. An average liberal picks up that Washington Post or clicks the link, sees the story and says, what is this? What is wrong with these people? Yeah, they're nuts. Absolutely nuts. But let me wrap up with a couple more stories just to explain. Things are going so well and people are starting to take notice. This is a story from August 30th, 2019 from the Foundation for Economic Education. Check this out. The poorest 20% of Americans are richer on average than most European nations. The privilege of living in the U.S. affords poor people more material resources than the averages for most of the world's richest nations. I know most people probably don't see this story from FEE. They're probably not, sitting around all these Democrats talking about how things are going great. The issue isn't so much whether they know it, it's whether they feel it. And when these people go to the store and they have their, widescreen TVs at discounted rates and their air conditioning and refrigerators, they got gas, their wages are going up, their job's better than ever. There is massive competition in the low-skilled labor market because unemployment is so low. People notice, okay? They don't notice for the same reasons we do. The average person isn't going to watch my video, see all this and say, wow, this is a really good reason to, vote conservative or vote Republican or something like that. The average person's going to feel it. They're going to be like, I paid off my car. I'm paying down my mortgage. I got my kids, the bills are being paid. My wages are up. It's been a great year. I don't want to rock the boat. That's what they're feeling. Now, I'll tell you this. I'm not sitting here telling you all this saying you should or shouldn't vote for anybody. But I will tell you this. The Democrats on their current course, chasing after the woke Twitterati, are driving themselves off the cliff while the rest of us stare confused and the country becomes more conservative. Not, in my opinion, because they actually hold conservative values, but because what the left now represents is no one knows what it is. It's indiscernible. It's something strange and confusing to the average person. The average liberal, my friends and my family, I talk to them and I say, do you identify with any one of these candidates? And they say, absolutely not. Bernie Sanders, several months ago, last year, 6 months or so ago, said we can't have open borders. Then several months later, starts talking about bringing in 50,000 climate refugees. It's a flip-flop because they're chasing each other off the cliff. They're constantly trying to one-up each other to win the activist vote so they can win the primary. But because of the internet era, this is what's really fascinating. I should probably write a book about this. Because of the speed of information, to stay ahead in the polls, you have to move faster than ever. Back in the day, the one-upsmanship among political parties happened during debates, for the most part. Somebody would go on a debate stage and say, I think we need health care for all Americans. And then someone else would chime in and say, well, we need to make sure we take care of everyone who's here, even if they're not American. The debate ends. No one hears from these people for 7 months, so they don't have to consider one-upping the other person until they're back on the debate stage. But now we're in the era of social media where everything is rapid response. So Pete Buttigieg tweets out something about the tensions in the Middle East that everyone's shocked by. And in order to win over the woke Twitterati, we're going to see another candidate come out and tweet something even more extreme to be like, I'm better than him. Vote for me. I'm more of an activist. Because of rapid response media, where everything is just instant, no one cares about the debates anymore because we already know what these candidates think. And they're one-upping each other every single day in a desperate bid to win over the activists. And they're going insane. So as the train speeds off towards the left, it starts going faster and faster and faster because they're all one-upping each other, especially with this large field, and people start jumping off the train, crashing into the ground, confused and politically homeless, people like me. And I jumped off a long time ago. But now we can see the data from Gallup that a lot more people are jumping off. Nobody wants to be, no one knows what that is anymore. So when asked, are you a liberal or conservative? They say, most people, I don't know. But a lot of people only know liberal, conservative. And they're going to go ahead and assume if you support the economy, if you recognize the wealth and grandeur of America, well, you're certainly not a liberal because they trash it all day and night. If you think we should have, controls on immigration like most Americans do, well, you're not a liberal because they're talking about giving away health care. If you think we've got a problem, if California is disastrous, you're certainly not a liberal because liberals control that state. Voters in 3 red to blue swing districts oppose impeachment. And I'll wrap it up here. It's a failed plan. I was talking to some family and they said that they were lifelong Democrats. They will always be a Democrat. And I said, and how do you feel? And they were complaining like, well, you need to talk more about Republicans. I'm like, okay, let me ask you a question. Do you identify with any of these Democrats? No. How do you feel about them saying X, Y, and Z? On the debate stage, this policy, I think it's insane. So if you're still claiming to be part of the Democratic Party while recognizing how insane they've gotten, don't get mad at me, okay? I don't consider myself to be, but I do like Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang, and I don't care about the word Democrat or not. I care about the principles of the individual. Now, Trump's the incumbent. He's not my first choice. It's going to be Tulsi or Yang, and they happen to be Democrats, okay? But they're the ones who are the least crazy, the most sane, and more importantly, the big issue for me, I'm really impressed with Andrew Yang because he's focused on forward-thinking solutions. Bernie Sanders, AOC, no, it's regressive policy from 100 years ago. Yes, we need this policy 100 years ago. It worked. It'll work again today. No. You need to listen to Andrew Yang, man. I'm not saying Andrew Yang's going to win. I don't think so. The point is, I think it's absurd to take offense at me criticizing the Democrats because you so strongly identify with a party that's gone completely nuts. And this is what I asked. I said, you're mad at me for criticizing the fact that the Democrats won't campaign on, they're not getting up on stage and talking about health care, and they're not talking about, the border, they're talking about impeachment. You're mad at me that all they ever say is orange man bad. And my family agreed with me. You're right. That is annoying. Great. So if they want to stand up and talk about important issues that are affecting the American people, they have every opportunity to do so, but they will not do it. And thus, as they ride the orange man bad train off the cliff, by all means, keep identifying with this party that is losing support. Keep doing it. I don't care. And I will keep criticizing them because they're nuts. They've lost their minds. I don't know what they're doing, man. The moderate corporatist type Democrats do not represent the average person. The Democratic Party is becoming slightly more conservative, while the progressives are convinced their path to victory is bringing in the far left, and it's just not the case. So I don't know what to tell you, man. you have, we'll see what happens. Look, I'm entirely open to being wrong, but the data so far today backs up what I've been saying for the past couple of years. Whether or not this holds true to 2020 is an entirely different story. And it could have to do with Trump's actions pertaining to, Middle Eastern tensions and things like that. So, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of people who believe that we're in a state, that we're facing a recession. A lot of people are getting close to that panic mode. But as far as I can tell, the media is trucking along saying everything's fantastic. Keep in mind, though, they did the same thing in 2008. So while the economy is running fantastically, it's really, really hard to predict. And we're in the longest economic expansion in U.S. history. I don't know. It's entirely possible in a couple months something bad happens. We just don't know what's going to happen. But for the time being, the Democrats are losing support. They're flipping conservative. The country is flipping conservative. Trump is winning. His approval rating is up amid everything that's going on. The latest poll shows approval rating is holding steady, slightly in the highest it's ever been. I don't know what to tell you, man. The Democrats are just a name now that represents nothing. They're fractured between the far left, the moderates. The moderates are out of touch and don't know what they're talking about. Joe Biden can't speak straight. Nancy Pelosi has no idea what she's doing. She's campaigning on Orange Man Bad. No one cares. And then you have the far left that they're proposing things that literally make no sense. Don't be surprised when people no longer identify as liberals, and even within the Democratic Party, more likely to identify as conservative. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. at youtube.com/TimCastNews. It is a separate channel, and I will see you all there.